determine whether the money is real if we start cutting checks to the taxpayer?
The buck stops with you. It is on you. You have to supervise and train your staff appropriately.
I don't think we're here if this effort had been put forward a year ago, 2 years ago. Why wait until now?
We didn't know. Alec's partners looked at this and they said, who should fix it? They didn't ask us. They didn't talk to us about it. They said, this is what the Comptroller General should do. And I'm not blaming, I put nothing on them. We just have to have a division between us and them.
Back to opening up a Sunday morning with a little heated conversation. And that's a piece of history we just saw there at the State House almost a week ago now.
It was.
8-hour plus removal hearing, as it's called, for State Treasurer Curtis Loftis, who in the end was voted 33-8, the Senate, in favor of removing him from office. It doesn't mean he's on the unemployment line right now, because the House still needs to do the same thing. And right now, the indicators are that they probably aren't going to do a hearing like this over that $1.8 billion accounting error that was confirmed by the much mentioned Alec's Partners group, that global financial consulting group that had to do a private audit of our state's finances. Where do we start this week?
I think we'll start right now by bringing in Catherine Glenn Foster.
Yeah. From the
Joining
DC
us from the DC studios. So good to have you here this Sunday morning. Yeah, I think
Great to be there.
The Curtis Loftis issue was a huge issue. It took up all day on Monday, you know?
It did. You know, they say that hindsight is 20/20, that the cover-up is worse than the crime, whether it's maybe your little brother eating the cookies, but you didn't tell mom in time before ladies group, or all the way up to President Nixon. But we heard on Monday the same question over and over. Why didn't you tell us? We know that the Treasurer's office had knowledge of this 7 years before, and he has an argument that it wasn't his fault. He may not have caused the problem, but why didn't he tell them 7 years ago, 5 years ago? Instead of just saying, that's not my responsibility, we're just the bank. We heard, yes, but you knew, your office knew, and you needed to be collaborative, not adversarial. So now we're seeing that there's this trust issue with the Senate. And they were asked really to overturn the will of the people who elected him. But that's exactly why we have ways to impeach or remove a public official when there's a problem. It's set up in the Constitution this way so that if there's a crime committed or dereliction of duty, you can remove someone from office if they're not doing their job. So now the question is just, where will the House go since they're up against the clock?
And that's one of the big questions, Brian, that I think we really have to take a look at here, because when you look at the House's procedures and what they can and cannot do, there's really no precedent set for this. The Senate had used what's called the Committee of the Whole, which meant that all 46 senators were responsible to act as a committee to take testimony from the treasurer, his staff, his attorneys, and they did that. And in doing so, they had a method for doing so. The House of Representatives does not have that at all. As a matter of fact, they don't have the committee as a whole. I was talking with several members of House leadership yesterday or earlier this week, and they said, listen, we've got 6 days left in the legislative calendar.
We
don't have time for this. And so sine die comes up on May 8th. And there are a lot of other things that we're going to be talking about this morning that are going to be really important for them to focus on. And when you look at this, the real question that came up was, and I heard this from several members of the House, do we want to make Curtis Loftis a political martyr going into 2026? He's already said right here on this show he was not going to run for office. And Catherine, we had a conversation with him where he said that he decided after all of this that he was going to run for office.
He is going to run for re-election.
Yes.
Yep.
And so when we look at that from that standpoint, is the House willing to do even more so to raise that ire, that attention, the fire that he's going to have to really want to do what he said right here on the air he was going to do, is to expose everything that he possibly can. And that's the place that we are right now with Curtis Loftis. The Senate has done its part. The House has to decide whether they're going to even take it up. And will there be 2/3 of the House who will then vote to remove him from office.
I don't think they'll even have the opportunity to do so, to be honest with you. And this would fall under the banner of dereliction of duty.
Right.
His attorneys did point out multiple times, and I think we have too on this show, that there has been no crime committed here. The money wasn't real. The FBI's not coming for anybody. SLED's not coming for anyone. We know the SLED chief would. He's a serious man. So if there was any inkling that a crime was committed here, this would be.
Right. And Catherine, to your point, and we heard it from that quote from Senator Overture Walker from right here in Richland County.
Just why wait?
If you had just come to us then instead of now with the same type of attitude, it would have been a completely different story.
That's right.
Yeah, but you could tell. Treasurer Loftis came in there almost hat in hand.
Which is very different than the way he had been
in
during those committee hearings.
Series of
exactly.
Hearings. Yeah, but after 8 hours of getting grilled, he did get a little frustrated. I'd have to say I would too.
After hearing all of that.
I'll give him that. So, someone else that is a popular topic on this program as well has shown some signs of frustration, and that's Congresswoman Nancy Mace. If we can go to that next segment.
Question from right over here is if you have any plans to have more town halls this year.
I have town halls every year. I have over a dozen every year.
Great. That was my entire question. You didn't have to go into this spiel.
You could have come to any of them last year.
Okay. And I'm
I had
asking
over
about
a
this year,
dozen.
not 2024.
Where were you the year before?
All right, right there. That video that you're looking at, a reel posted by Congresswoman Mace from a week ago, last weekend, inside an Ulta store in the Low Country, sparring with a constituent who, by what we can tell, simply asked, hey, when are you doing another town hall? And it became so much more. And the video blew up.
We're seeing some really strong reactions to that video clip. You're right. We're seeing people calling it unhinged, laughing at it. First of all, we have to react here with charity, even when the elected official making a scene is on the other side. Always charity. But, as a public official, you have to know that you're going to get approached at work and events, but also in the Ulta and in the grocery store and in the streets. And it can be so hard to balance personal boundaries with the public accountability. So sometimes that's why we like to get away and go to a place where nobody knows your name. But if Chapel Roan has to deal with it, you better believe Nancy Mace has to deal with it. She was elected by the people, for the people, and that's why it's so important to have respectful discourse between elected representatives and their constituents. Now, as a public individual and as a woman, you know that public safety has to be a priority, and people who are approaching someone should recognize that. But I think it's okay to approach someone respectfully, especially if they're an elected representative, and just say, hey, are you going to have another town hall? Especially if you're willing to take no for an answer and give them the privacy if they ask for it. And so for me, the deeper issue here is really Representative Mace's response, because her constituent stayed from the video that we saw a pretty respectful distance away. He backed away. He wasn't even, as accused, actually wearing Daisy Dukes. But Mace's confrontational stance and the profanity and the name calling and not letting him just walk away, but insisting on creating this kind of viral gotcha moment. Some might say that's a mighty unfair characterization of a constituent who just wanted to ask about town hall meetings. And some would say it's unbecoming of a public official. We expect better. We need to rise to better. And if and when we can't, I think it just might be time to take a break and get away from it all and go someplace where nobody knows your name.
I think that's the point in this, Brian.
Yeah, to step aside for a moment, cool down, cool off. But it is worth noting there was a town hall just days after that happened.
Right.
In a private gated community, Beaufort area. And there was a little controversy there as well. I don't think anything rose to this level, but they were taking on a number of topics, and there were some protesters present.
Nancy Mace does have a say. It's either fight or flight, and I think the other part of it here in this particular case, the way it looks, it's not fight or flight; it's gaslighting, and that's where I think it was fueled and it continued. If it had been a simple, hey, are you having a town hall? No, I'm not
Wednesday.
going to. Or I'm going to be down in Beaufort. If you'd like to get a way of getting in, then you can do so. But the other factor that goes into this goes back to the old adage from Lee Atwater, who was the political advisor of George W. Bush, or George H.W. Bush, back during the 90s. And Lee Atwater had this phrase that said, there's no such thing as bad publicity.
Yeah, we all know that one.
You take a look at this. There are 4, 5, 6 names right now of people who are potentially running for governor in 2026. Keep in mind, we are 13 months away from the Republican gubernatorial primary of June 2026. That's not that long. And when you take a look at the fact that in her own reel, she puts her name in bold fluorescent pink letters at the bottom. This is, I want my name out there. I'm going to build name ID. And I think that's exactly what she did, because I think it's what can I do to raise my name in preparation for the gubernatorial race in 2026.
Yeah, and it's coming, and it's coming. We did have a response from Congresswoman Mace just a few days after, and also the gentleman in the video. If we could listen to what they had to say about that incident.
If a woman is standing there alone and she feels threatened and the man is being aggressive with her, the man should respect the woman and take a step back. A real man protects women. And this he's not a real man. He was out there for political reasons.
I started filming before I asked the question. I understand that in today's political atmosphere, we need to protect ourselves and make sure that we're showing the full truth. So anytime I approach a situation where I'm asking a question with someone who might be an elected representative, I want to make sure that I'm good to go.
You're always invited.
You know, we weren't there, but it looks like there's a fair distance between the two of them, just based on camera angles here.
You've got at least 5-6 feet right there. And did he approach her? No, as a matter of fact, you get to the end of this, and if you watch her version of it, she kind of continues on in the argument after he's trying to turn around and walk off. And I think this is a place where when she posted up there, she makes sure that her name's out there, and people are still talking about it, not only here, but on the other side of the pond as well.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of conversation focused on this. And there will likely be more viral incidents that will come as we inch closer to people officially filing for that 2026 gubernatorial race. Another thing that's stirring people up over the last week, we've talked about it many times on this program, casino gambling here in South Carolina. They rolled the dice this past week. Let's take a listen to that.
There are more losers than winners. That's the odds.
They are built to profit from loss and to disguise addiction as opportunity.
So if you are against having this type of economic development to the area, what would be your solution?
Solution by a development corporation is using the old site of the Santee Outlet Mall and converting it into a casino along the I-95 corridor. As you heard, some members of the religious community are against that. And they, not always the religious community, but that was very apparent in what was about a 2-hour, Dave, would you call it a listening session panel
had? It was
had?
Considered a subcommittee hearing, but they took no votes. They actually heard from folks on 3 different gambling bills. There's one on casino gambling, there's one on sports betting, there's one on games of chance versus games of skill. Ironically,
like basketball, skill.
Ironically, one of the changes that was made by the appeals court in South Carolina made if you paid to be in a tournament that you could not receive any prize from that. Well, guess what that takes care of? The heritage. It takes care of every tennis tournament, every bass fishing tournament, everything you could possibly win an award on if you pay a fee to get in. So they've got work they've got to do, but the casino bill was the one that was the driving force right now, because here's the thing about it. With 6 days left in this legislative session, there has been a huge push to get this bill moving through. It's the I-95 Economic and Education Stimulus Act, if that's what, that's the way it's the full name. Official name. But what they're looking to do right now is to place a casino in Santee, South Carolina. That's in Orangeburg County right there along I-95, basically in the middle of I-95 where I-95 and 26 come together. And the question that comes out of this is, will they turn around and take this facility, tear it down, and build something new as a resort in a crossroads community that really is a difficult place for so many? You take a look at it right now, though, legalized gambling in South Carolina, the only legalized gambling in this state is the South Carolina Education Lottery. It goes for college scholarships. It goes to pay for 4K. Ironically, you turn around and you take a look at some of the religious organizations that were out there. Religious organizations in South Carolina, religious colleges and universities, took in $116 million of lottery funds in scholarships over the last 4 years. That's a number right there where At what point is the acceptance of a state-run lottery versus a private-run casino really going to come into play? So whether or not the legislature will have the will to be able to allow another form of gambling in the state is the real question right here.
And would the governor sign it into law? Because he has said that he would oppose something like this, casino gambling or even sports gambling in general. So that's another hurdle that it has to get through.
Exactly.
That's right. And so will South Carolina end its monopoly on games of chance? With the exception of that state-run education lottery, South Carolina, as well as its governor, has historically been averse to gambling. So will we allow $1 billion of private investment to come into our state, bringing 4,600 jobs into what's currently an economically depressed area? That I-95 corridor, it has been called the corridor of shame. And while other areas of the state have been seeing economic development, that area is still standing in the shadows of growth. So this could be a great opportunity for the region. We have 44 states that have legalized casino gambling. A couple of years ago, Dave, you and I were out in Vegas back in 2023, I guess, and we had a great time. But right now, our highways are jammed up with the buses and the cars driving up to North Carolina to give them our money.
As a matter of fact, the casino in North Carolina, they did a recent study of license plates of the casino right there across the state line.
Not from North Carolina.
42% of the license plates in the parking lot in the casino in North Carolina were South Carolina license plates. That doesn't even count the tour buses that come through.
That would
and
indicate a
everything else.
demand, would you not say?
There could be.
Yeah.
But the other demand, Brian and Catherine, I think that really comes into play here, though, is the fact that we've been having this revival of, are we going to have a tax reform plan or not? House Republicans came out with a plan. We had the Speaker of the House right here on this show just a few weeks ago touting that tax plan, that tax reform plan, going to a flat tax, but it got a ton of pushback because it ended up, in essence, raising taxes for lower income people, because right now 44% of South Carolinians pay absolutely no income tax effectively. But the casino has an ability to raise anywhere from $75 to $100 million in tax revenue every single year. Think about that in a decade. That's $1 billion in a decade. If that's the case, then that could be what House Republican leadership sees as an opportunity to say, yes, we'll bring in casino gaming into South Carolina because we know that the tax revenue that comes from it is going to end up benefiting the state one way or another.
It could help build some of those roads and up those teacher salaries that mystery $1.8 billion was supposed to pay for. Remember that?
The 1.8, the missing or not missing money?
Not
I don't
missing,
know.
that wasn't there.
Not really missing.
That wasn't really missing because it wasn't ever really there. Or we could have a whole nother Monday show just about that one right there.
Yeah, we could. No laughing matter on this final item that we want to talk about, but it's another item that has had great difficulty working its way through both chambers, and that is a hate crime law here in South Carolina.
I just don't understand why it's still sitting on somebody's desk.
This is a new day. We are no longer going to be complacent in this. We are no longer going to sit back in this. We are no longer going to remain silent in this. We all said as a people of God, amen.
You just saw Representative Jermaine Johnson, who's been on this program before.
In June, 10 years.
Part of a rally called Hands Across the State House last week, pushing lawmakers to finally pass a hate crimes law named after the late Senator Clementa C. Pinckney, who was killed in the horrific Mother Emanuel church shooting 10 years ago. This June will be 10 years that happened. And of course, that horrible crime committed by an avowed racist, Dylan Roof. That's the genesis for this bill that's gone through the House 3 times, but never gets any further. Just stalls out in the Senate.
There are 4 states without a comprehensive statewide hate crimes law. 2 states, 2 of those 4, have a partial law, Arkansas and Indiana. 2 of them, South Carolina and Wyoming have none at all. And look, this is a difficult issue, especially as a lawyer, because hate crimes laws add a crime to already criminal acts like violence and vandalism. So when we add a hate crimes law, we're adding punishment for the motive, not just the action. And so two identical acts of violence or vandalism may be punished differently. So it does raise First Amendment free speech, even free thought, free belief concerns, the cornerstones of our nation. Some might argue that it verges on thought policing. And then you have to question, who's to say that what's considered a hate crime or a hateful thought will stay the same? What happens under the wrong administration? On the other hand, a hate crime against a disenfranchised group, it does have ripple effects. It has harms to society that are much broader than just the individual. There's the fear, the intimidation, and the terrorism that's inherent in hate crimes, and it spreads far beyond that immediate victim. And we do want people to think and to believe and to do better. So hate crimes laws can be a teaching tool and a deterrent. They signal our societal values, and they address historical injustices and the legacies of violence against marginalized groups, especially when you have local authorities who've historically failed to actually act. But since it increases punishment for the same crime based on some motives but not others, a lot of people argue that it doesn't actually advance justice, much less restorative justice.
Well, and I think, Brian, you also have to take into account, as we have heard, this is the third time that there has been an attempt to pass hate crimes legislation. Total inside baseball here in politics, though, you have it pass in the House, but it can never get through the Senate. And one of the reasons behind that is there are three particular parts of this, because, Catherine, as we've talked about before on the air, when you look at this, you've got different areas of consideration when it comes to types of people that you can have hate against. There's race, there's gender, there's sex, but the three that matter the most to some very core conservative Republicans, there's three that they're in there. One is religion, the other is gender, and the other is sexual identity. They are very concerned.
That's the hang-up.
That's the hang-up. Those three categories right there, because then the question comes down to, well, what happens when a pastor gets up to speak and says that this is the way that things are to be taught in our religion, and then somebody else goes out from there and does a crime against somebody else. That's a problem that they sit there and go, well, how are we going to deal with that? And again, Catherine, to your point, is this something where you're actually trying to police thought, or is it policing action? And which one is the better way to handle that from a law standpoint?
That's right. And so when we're looking towards policing the motive, anyone who commits a crime has some motive. And when you say that some are worse than others, some may have a greater ripple effect. But the question is how to educate and how to actually make a difference there. Is this the most effective method? When you look at the different ways that motive-based laws could be applied, they can raise concerns on both sides.
And so in this particular case, Brian, I think when you look at this is where you see a hang-up in the deliberative body of the Senate going, well, wait a minute, we've got an issue here. And let's just talk reality real quick, too. The House of Representatives has used the ability to have a vote on hate crimes several different times to get other pieces of legislation passed. So when the heartbeat law came up, they said, okay, well, if you will allow us to vote on heartbeat, then we'll turn around and we'll do a vote on hate crimes. And that's oftentimes the horse trading of politics, as it happens in just about every deliberative and legislative body across the world.
I would agree with that. The clock is definitely ticking, though, on that issue at the State House right now, with just single-digit days remaining in this session, and some other items. They probably won't get to this. It might be something that maybe gets revisited in January, but it's another wait-and-see situation, much to the chagrin of a lot of folks who have really been pushing hard for this.
Right, exactly.
All right, before we wrap up this week, we do want to shift our focus to another item that played out at the State House this week, Second Chance Day.
Right.
At the State House, we invite Reverend Hillary Taylor to our program. She and Catherine are going to talk about that. Of course, Reverend Taylor, a longtime contributor here to our Connect to the Capitol segment.
Yes, Brian. South Carolina has the lowest recidivism rate in America, thanks in large part to the leadership at the Department of Corrections. That's one of the things that South Carolina does well. But Thursday's first annual Second Chance Day rally was about how we can do even better, giving those who are incarcerated hope and a second chance at life, reducing barriers to housing, employment, education, and more, and promoting successful reentry. Organized by the South Carolina Justice Partners Coalition, this event shines a spotlight on the challenges facing people reentering society after incarceration and the urgent need for policies that offer true second chances. Reverend Hillary Taylor, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. South Carolina's incarceration rate is higher than that of any independent democratic nation. What do you think is driving that? And what reforms do you see as most urgent for breaking that cycle?
Yes, there are several things that the Second Chance Day at the State House is really aimed at. First and foremost, decreasing some of the status offenses that young people, children, teenagers experience, because once you were impacted or once you were incarcerated, it's really hard to just sort of get out of the system, especially if you're a younger person, especially if you don't come from means to hire a good quality lawyer. And so we want to make sure that people don't become incarcerated who don't need to be incarcerated. So, make sure that kids who are skipping school don't get into the same facilities that people who are causing real and very traumatic harm.
Sure. Legislation like the Ban the Box bill and expanded expungement laws, they aim to help people find housing and jobs after prison. What role does economic opportunity play in reducing recidivism?
Oh, hands down. It's one of the biggest things. In fact, if you're not able to find a job, then you're almost forced to go into kinds of underground economics or black market economics that put you at a greater risk for becoming incarcerated again. So whatever we can do to make it easier for people to have good, well-paying jobs that any normal person in our society would have, that is what we need to do. And South Carolina could do a better job at that.
Second Chance Day is also about hope and human dignity, not just throwing lives away, sometimes even before they get a chance to live. But what do you say to those who believe that some people don't deserve a second chance?
I think that, one thing that I have said on this program continuously is that we are more than the worst thing we've ever done. And we are more than the worst thing that's ever happened to us. And some people never really got a chance to have the same kinds of access to privilege and good education and good, well-paying jobs. And so this is a way that we can make sure that all South Carolinians flourish and have the best access to education and job opportunities, because when we all succeed, when one person succeeds, we all succeed. And we just want to make sure that everybody has a chance to be a contributing South Carolinian citizen.
On Thursday, we heard from people who shared their stories, their expertise, and their hope over at the State House, from formerly incarcerated South Carolinians bravely advocating for change to the lawmakers listening and the justice partners leading the charge. Second chances aren't just a policy idea, they're a moral imperative. And we are grateful to you, Reverend Taylor, for coming on our program again.
Thank you for having me.
Good conversation there with Reverend Taylor. Always brings a nice perspective to our program.
It really does. And Catherine, I thought you did a great job of just allowing that opportunity to say, here's a chance for second chances. And that is an important thing when you start taking a look at those who are incarcerated and those who face that in the state of South Carolina and across the country.
Yeah, good
stuff. The message we heard on Thursday was clear. Redemption is real, transformation is possible, and our laws should reflect that truth.
Well, now we shift to what comes next at the State House as the clock ticks down. 6 days left.
In this half of the legislative session, you've got 3 days next week and 3 days the following, May 8th, 5 p.m.
That's it.
Sine die. That is the end of the legislative session for this half of the session. So let's just break this down. Remember, it's a 2-year session. So from January until May 8th of 2025 is the first half. And then you're going to do the same thing. There's 54 days of a legislative session when they come back in January of 2026. That's also going to be the same time when people are gearing up for that gubernatorial election, and every House member is going to be up for a vote in June of 2026 as well.
Yeah, so
Exciting times.
The Senate's done with their budget work, but of course there'll have to be some.
There will be
some compromise.
There'll have to be a conference committee of those two, 3 members of the House, 3 members of the Senate, who will basically hammer out the differences between them, but they will probably come back and finalize the budget and any vetoes from the governor sometime later in May.
No one's going anywhere for good until all that is done. There will be a callback, I'm sure.
There will be a callback.
There always is to deal with the vetoes. Well, another busy week is one way to put it.
It is.
Here
but it is Sunday in South Carolina.
And in D.C.
And we're glad that we can have the dual screen Sunday with you. Catherine, it's good to have you coming in from the D.C. Area today, and it's been really good to have everybody having you watch. We have a lot of new segments that we have just added to our Connect to the Capitol Facebook page as well. Connect to the Capitol on Facebook. You can see a lot of the entire shows that we do here, but also the
extras.
All the Connect to the Capitol extras, exactly. And there are a lot of those there. If you're not already following us, do so that you can make sure that you stay connected to the Capitol.
See you next week.